Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
And the headlines this Thursday, February 25th. Supporters of Myanmar's military attack anti-coup protesters in Yangon. Churches in Brazil are leading the way in providing relief after floods that left thousands of families homeless. And the Church in Australia continues preparations on its journey towards their upcoming plenary assembly. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells. Our top story today, in Myanmar, supporters of the military junta turned violent on Thursday as they beat anti-coup protesters in Yangon with clubs and stones. Several pro-democracy demonstrators were injured in the violence. As Devin Watkins reports, international pressure on the junta is growing, with Facebook wiping it from its platforms.
Pro-military protesters armed with knives, clubs, and slingshots attacked coup opponents in downtown Yangon on Thursday. Around 1,000 army supporters gathered before demonstrators turned up for a rally. They threatened photographers and journalists with violence escalating quickly. Groups were photographed beating individual protesters. Emergency workers assisted one man laying on the ground after being attacked by a man wielding a knife. In another area of Yangon, police barred hundreds of students from exiting the main university campus in order to demonstrate. International pressure continues to grow for a resolution to the crisis. Facebook announced Thursday it had banned the military from using its Facebook and Instagram platforms with immediate effect. In a blog post, Facebook said the escalating deadly violence against protesters was the reason for the ban. "We believe the risks of allowing the Tatmadaw on Facebook and Instagram are too great," reads the post, condemning the exceptionally severe human rights abuses and the clear risk of future military-initiated violence in Myanmar. The ban covers the military, its subunits, army-controlled media, and the Ministries of Home Affairs, Defense, and Border Affairs. Regional governments are also taking steps to end the impasse. Indonesia's foreign minister visited Bangkok to meet with both Thailand and Myanmar's foreign ministers. The meeting was part of efforts to coordinate a regional response. The Indonesian foreign minister said afterwards that all parties were asked to exercise restraint and to avoid violence and bloodshed. Separately, Japan is reportedly working on plans to stop new development aid to Myanmar. The government denied preparing for sanctions, but said a change in policy was possible. Myanmar's political crisis, it seems, is far from over. I'm Devin Watkins.
Elsewhere, European bishops have emphasized the importance of the protection of care of all life in a letter to the President of the European Parliament. In November, the European Parliament issued a resolution calling for greater access to abortion in Poland in the wake of a court ruling in that country that made most abortions illegal. Father Benedict Mayaki tells us more.
The Commission of the Bishops' Conferences of the European Union, COMISE, has questioned some points of a resolution passed by the European Parliament on the so-called right to abortion in Poland in November 2020. A letter issued by the bishops on Monday and addressed to the President of the European Parliament, David Maria Sassoli, stressed that the Catholic Church, which seeks to support women in life situations arising from difficult or unwanted pregnancies, calls for the protection and care of all unborn life. In October 2020, a ruling by the Polish Constitutional Court established a near-total ban on abortion in the country, permitting it only in cases of rape or incest or when the pregnancy threatens the life of the mother. The ban, which came into effect in January, sparked protests in the Polish capital, with groups divided among supporters and opponents of the move. Following that, the November resolution of the European Parliament called for EU institutions to do more to support healthcare services across member states and to promote grassroots and civil society groups that foster the rule of law. The bishops highlighted in their letter that neither the EU legislation nor the European Convention on Human Rights provide for a right to abortion, leaving the matter consequently to the legal systems of the member states. The bishops noted that fully respecting the same rule of law requires respect for the competences of the member states and the choices made by them in their exercise of their exclusive competences. Another point of concern for the bishops is that the Parliament's resolution appears to question the fundamental right to conscientious objection, which they added is an emanation of the freedom of conscience referred to in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU. Comesse went on to stress the necessity of considering fundamental rights like freedom of thought, conscience and religion in the light of their universality, inviolability, indivisibility and interdependence. The bishops concluded their letter by affirming their availability to provide further clarifications on this crucial issue, which they warn might have a negative impact on the way the union is perceived by member states. I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
Meanwhile, in the United States, several committee chairmen of the U.S. Bishops' Conference have written a letter to Congress expressing their opposition to the so-called Equality Act. The bishops warn that the Equality Act, while purporting to protect people experiencing same-sex attraction or gender discordance from discrimination, rather represents an imposition by Congress of novel and divisive viewpoints regarding gender on individuals and organizations, including dismissing sexual difference and falsely presenting gender as a social construct. Re-echoing Pope Francis's reflections on the issue, the bishops noted that biological sex and the social-cultural role of sex, or gender, can be distinguished but not separated. Therefore, they continue, it is one thing to be understanding of human weakness and the complexities of life, and another to accept ideologies that attempt to sunder what are inseparable aspects of reality. In this regard, they lamented that the act can be construed to include an abortion mandate, which is, they say, a violation of precious rights to life and conscience. Elsewhere in the Americas, in Brazil, churches are opening their doors to the thousands of families left homeless in the western Amazon after torrential rains and flooding across the state of Acre. Francesca Merlo tells us more.
At an already critical time due to the COVID-19 pandemic, those most hard hit by the floods in Brazil are the poor who live on the banks of the river. And this is a case for the community of Sena Madureira. In Sena Madureira, the flood has affected 17,000 people. Of these, 4,000 are already housed in public reception facilities such as sports fields and schools, and the Catholic Church has joined in the solidarity mobilization and is welcoming families. Father Moises de Oliveira Coelho of the Order of the Servants of Mary told Vatican News, "We have some chapels that are being used as temporary shelters, whilst others are occupied by the goods that families in need of help have managed to recover. The Church is also working to collect donations for those who have lost everything." Father Moises explained that this is why the Assao Bom Samaritano, Action of the Good Samaritan, has been launched. The campaign aims to collect food, shoes, clothing, personal hygiene and cleaning products. We receive donations from our faithful, from people of goodwill, and we prepare food parcels and then distribute them to shelters, he says. The solidarity of the local church does not stop at the current emergency, but also looks to the aftermath, to when people will have to return home. For this reason, Father Moises says that they are putting donation money aside. We have opened an account so that after the floods are over, we will be able to help families buy cleaning products, personal hygiene items and basic necessities. The flooding of regional rivers in the state of Acre also created problems in the capital Rio Branco, in Cruzeiro do Sul, and in the municipalities of Taracuá, Ferrillo, Santa Rosa do Purus and Rodrigues Albas. To deal with the emergency, all public agencies are on high alert and are providing relief to the populations at risk. In all, about 120,000 people are affected. I am Francesca Merlo.
In other world news, France and Germany said on Thursday they would be stepping up controls at their common border, while the bishops of Ireland are calling on people in the country to join the vaccination campaign against COVID-19. Lydia O'Kane has a roundup of the latest news on the coronavirus pandemic.
From new border controls in Europe to good news on the single jab vaccine front, eradicating COVID-19 continues to be a priority for governments and pharmaceutical companies alike. In order to contain a spike in coronavirus infections, France on Thursday announced it was bringing in new COVID-19 restrictions for the area around its common border with Germany. This means that cross-border workers who had exemptions until now will need to show negative PCR tests to get through if travelling for reasons unrelated to their jobs. Both countries said that joint police patrols could be stepped up. While restrictions continue, so does the development of effective vaccines. A review by the US Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, published on Wednesday found the one-shot Johnson & Johnson coronavirus vaccine to be safe and effective, paving the way for emergency use. The FDA's panel of independent experts was due to meet on Friday to decide whether to approve the jab. Meanwhile, the bishops of Ireland are once again calling on people to join the COVID-19 vaccination campaign. In a statement, they reiterate that safe and effective vaccination is essential for prevention and should be done not only to protect oneself, but also to protect the lives and health of the most vulnerable and for the common good of humanity. The bishops write, the development and provision of the vaccines is already providing reassurance for those who are most vulnerable to the virus and will help us to return to normality in terms of work, education, religious practice and sporting and leisure activities as soon as possible. They also appeal to the Ministry of Health and health authorities to give priority to chaplains working in social health facilities and to priests who have to celebrate funerals. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
And finally, the Church in Australia on Thursday released the Instrumentum Laboris, or working document, for its upcoming plenary council, whose first assembly is scheduled for October of this year. Entitled Continuing the Journey, the document draws heavily on the voices heard during the preparatory listening and dialogue and listening and discernment phases leading up to the council. They also heard from other key sources, according to a press release from the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference. Robin Gomes has more on that story.
The fifth plenary council, an important national ecclesial event of Australia's church, is taking place in two phases. The first assembly will take place in Adelaide from October 2nd to 10th this year, and the second will be held in Sydney July 4th to 9th, 2022. Archbishop Timothy Costello of Perth, president of the plenary council, said that the role of the working document is to offer an account of what the people of God have expressed as an invitation for ongoing discernment. This, he said, is an exciting step forward, and we take it together amidst a time of great change. Archbishop Costello noted that more than 220,000 people participated in the first stages of listening and dialogue, and those voices can be heard clearly in the working document. He said it provides a catalyst for the Church to renew the journey of prayer and discernment towards the October Assembly. There are several reasons behind the upcoming plenary council. First of all, Pope Francis has invited the local church to dialogue. Besides, Australia's contemporary society has changed significantly since the Church's last plenary council 83 years ago in 1937, which was 28 years before the end of the Second Vatican Council. But most importantly, the 2017 final report of Australia's Royal Commission into Institutional Response to Child Sexual Abuse has called for a deep consideration and response from the Church. Explaining the content of the 76-page working document, Archbishop Costello said it highlights several issues, such as co-responsibility in mission and governance, a response to the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Sexual Child Abuse, the Church's solidarity with First Australians and those on the margins of society, and promoting an integral ecology of life for all and our common home. I'm Robin Gomes.
And that brings us just about to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, and to hear this broadcast as a podcast, you can visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. You can also get all the latest updates on our Facebook page and Twitter account. Many thanks to our technicians in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells.